Often when you are to speak on a context to describe an event or a situation, then you try and find the Torah that relates to it. But I'm very lucky with this one that this text found me. And then actually I didn't have to think of something to say, because I think 2 years ago when I was teaching in a quite frum shul in LA, they said, well, what's Limmud? And this just came out. And this is what I believe. And it's quite emotional. I'm quite an emotional person at the moment, but I'll do my best not to cry too much. So, sorry for this, but that's what it is. Elie Wiesel is one of my most amazing heroes. Holocaust survivor, Nobel Prize winner, one of the best writers in existence, I think. And I've read everything he's ever written. And there's a wonderful collection of essays. He's got an essay called A Quest for Jerusalem. And he talks about growing up in his small town of Sinyet in Eastern Europe before the Shoah, that Jerusalem for him was something magical. That every year, every time they davened, 3 times a day, he would say, Yerushalayim Echa, we should rebuild Jerusalem. He imagined this perfect place. He'd never been there. Right? We're talking about the 1940s in Eastern Europe. He'd never been there. And he imagined it as the most amazing place. And on Tisha B'Av, they would cry for Jerusalem. And Jerusalem was a magical, wonderful place, but he'd never been. And then he says that, in his life, he's experienced Jerusalem 3 times. And he tells the story of the 3 Jerusalems he experienced. And they're quite shocking. And the first one is what is the centre of what Elie Wiesel's life is, which is in the Shoah in Auschwitz. And he writes the following, and it's just, he describes getting off the trains, losing his father, and then says the following. Men and women and children torn from every land, bearers of every name in Jewish history, representing every facet of destiny, I saw them converge on this place, this exalted place of mankind, in the shadow of stakes for another era. And suddenly a shattering thought crossed my mind. This is Jerusalem. This is the hour of redemption. The Messiah had arrived at last, and the children of Israel were pouring in from everywhere, ending their exile. The imagery is just unbelievable. They were surging forward to welcome him, to thank and bless him. Gone the time of torment, gone the time of darkness. The ingathering of the exiles was taking place in front of my eyes. And here was Jerusalem, both earthly and heavenly, opening its doors to its inhabitants, dead and living, come to glorify her at midnight. Now I can die, we can all die, happy and at peace in Jerusalem. That was his first Jerusalem. And then he describes, years later, he survived and lived in France, began to write his books, and got involved in Russian Jewry, and would fly to Moscow and meet Jews. And he describes a night, I won't read this one out to you, he describes a night, Simchat Torah night, where for once the centre of Moscow wasn't the Red Square, it was this little building, this little gymnasium on a side street. And he said he was standing there and thought no one's going to turn up. And suddenly from different doors, people sheepishly walked in, till there were thousands of Jews secretly dancing on Simchat Torah. And he said, I was in Jerusalem. This is Jerusalem again. Because when Jews get together, whatever it is, in that global, massive way, which is impossible, I'm in Jerusalem. That's how he sees it, a religious mind, and we all have that. You can be in Jerusalem anywhere, if you feel it. And his third one was in June 1967, when soon after the 6-Day War, he visited Jerusalem. And he writes, everyone was weeping. We were looking back, searching for our invisible forerunners, fallen along the way, victim of chance and misfortune. In what way did we deserve that we were refused, that they were refused? We were accepted and they were refused. We wept. There was nothing else to do. Surely not for them. He says, I remember, like any pilgrim, I took a scrap of paper and scribbling a wish on it, slipped it into the cracks of the wall. Though one is not expected to reveal the nature of such a message, I shall do so anyway. I had written, this is my 3rd visit to Jerusalem. May I never forget the 2 that preceded it. And a voice inside me replied, Amen. I recognized the voice. It was not mine. It was that of an old man who had died, a sacrificial offering tonight in another Jerusalem. And I remember reading this essay the first time, and I just thought, this is an amazing way of looking at the world. That whenever Jews get together, he grew up as a child, imagining his Jerusalem. And then in the camps, when the world was at an end, he thought the Messiah must be coming. I'm in Jerusalem. And in Moscow, when he saw Russian Jewry come back to life, he knew he was in Jerusalem. And the 3rd time, when he got to the place itself, he knew he was in Jerusalem. And I said in LA, completely seriously, without any kind of cheesiness, I said, Limmud is Jerusalem. That's what it is. And when you come, you see it. And my first year that I came, On the last night, we were all doing the sing-song, the Misibar, when it was still fittable in one little room. And this essay was going through my head. I was in Jerusalem, because everyone was together. There was no beginnings or ends to the circles, and it felt like Jerusalem. Elie Wiesel writes a wonderful thing about Jerusalem earlier in the essay. He says, they say there was a miracle. There was room for everybody in the temple, that everyone had a place, and when they kneeled down to bow, there was room for everybody. He said, that's just not physically possible. He said, that wasn't the miracle. He said, I'll tell you what the miracle was. There wasn't any room. The miracle was, nobody complained. And his understanding of what that means, and of what Limmud is when there's a mess on the floor, and it's not ideal and perfect. And people do complain, but we don't, because we understand there's something bigger than that. And so I've given you something which is, I know, quite shocking and quite powerful, but in a religious sense, people have compared Limmud to the Lehrhaus, Rosenzweig, or possibly to the Kala. The rabbis would get together twice a year to do intense learning. And there's an element to that. But both of those are education-based. They're not bigger, cultural, human, destiny, eternal connections. And Jerusalem does it. There's a Jerusalem inside you. Every time you pray, you sing, either if you daven, you say Yerushalayim Echa, or you sing Yerushalayim Shel Zahav. But when you hear that song, I know your heart jumps for your connection that every Jew has. And we daven, we face Jerusalem. But Limmud is building Jerusalems around the world because they're homing devices for Jews to come together. And then they'll also find their way to the real Jerusalem. So it's a very religious idea, but deep down you should know that Limmud is part of Yerushalayim. That's what it is, and it's golden. Thank you.